My name is McGill. I have a bachelor's in psychology. I really enjoy statistics, and welcome to my delving into the FBI database of murders mostly from 2011. My notes and sources will be available at the very end. There'll be a slide for sources, and then there'll be a slide where you can email me for this PowerPoint presentation. So if I go through something too quickly, I'm sorry, I can't stop for you, but you can email me. In fact, please do for a copy of this. Some of the graphs I made myself from the FBI database. Some of them I redirected from online sources that are all cited. But please wait. Oh, warning, there are many statistics. You can't see it, but they are there. And dark humor. If murder is something that has affected your life, if even domestic violence is something that has affected your life, I am very sorry. I will not be handling this with sensitivity and care. I will be handling this with glib humor because some things are too ugly to look directly in the face, especially at 9 a.m. in the morning. So I hope that you understand. I have acquaintances, distant people that I know who have been murdered, but no one close to me, so it is not something that I have the same emotional connection to that some of you might. And so if you have to get up and leave, now would be a good time, and I am not at all offended. There isn't too much death and war, but that might be the direction that the conversation takes. And this is not at all a substitute for your own research. You're going to have to do so much research. Once you figure out the particular how to kill someone, it's going to be just a ton of you standing, your best friend, spouse, partner, and being like, okay, now if I do this, do you think the blood would go that way? And there are resources for that. So let's get started with the who. Can you? Oh, no.
We'll be right back.
Okay. Demographically speaking, we're going to go into demographics. I have a youngish white woman. What is she, a victim or a perpetrator, statistically speaking? Who wants to volunteer? She's neither. White women are the safest people in America, y'all. Yeah, we can stop carrying our keys around parking lots. If your husband does not own a gun, you are going to live a long and happy life. The odds are in your favor. No one wants to kill you except your spouse, as a general rule of thumb. So victims, you can't see it, but victims are 77% male, 22% female. Men are killing men at an alarming rate and largely leaving the ladies out of it. Now you'll notice that 77 and 22 don't add up to 100. Not everything is accounted for. I'm not sure why, but I surely hope that it's because they couldn't piece the bodies together. I hope that's not. So murderers, also mostly male, not that often female. And we're going to go into some of the gender differences later because they are fascinating. Most of the time, I kind of brush it off when people are like, oh, men and women are so different. When they come to murder, men and women are so different, y'all. So different. It says the husband did it. Men are much more likely to be killed in a public place. That is because men are much more likely to go to a bar, mouth off to a stranger who is armed, and die. Women, we don't. When was the last time you mouthed off to a stranger in a bar? You didn't, and you're still alive. Look at that. That's amazing. Women are much more likely to be killed at home than anywhere else. You are 2.5 times more likely to be shot by a partner than murdered in any other way. So once again, ladies, if your husband isn't going to shoot you, enjoy your life. No one else is coming after you. We're taught to believe that there are bad guys. I'll take questions at the end. We're taught to believe that there are bad guys hiding in every closet, in every corner. They're not there. They're not there. Statistically speaking, they're very likely. Men are also intimate partners, your wife, your girlfriend, whoever, the girl that you're living with. She's more likely than the average Joe to murder you. The two men that I know-ish and know of were both murdered by their wives, and it looked like a suicide. It was extremely sad. So your wife is still a danger to you. but not as dangerous as that guy you're mouthing off to in the bar. So if that is not a habit of yours, you also get to live a long and healthy life, statistically speaking. I want to go in a little bit on disrespect as a murder motive. And I need to backtrack a little bit and be a little bit of a killjoy. And that is because we love to write intricate and complicated murders. We love to write murderers who, like Moriarty, and they make a puzzle for Sherlock, and you have to solve all the clues, and you have to, it was premeditated and planned out meticulously with the ice pick, and no one can solve it because the ice pick melted and there are no prints. This is not your typical murder. This is a killjoy presentation where I talk about your typical murder. Please do not let that discourage you from writing a complicated puzzle murder. Those are a lot of fun. But I want you to be very much aware that the average murder is quite boring and it's done for stupid reasons, like someone peed on my shoes. And now if you cannot imagine yourself killing someone because someone peed on your shoes, congratulations. That means that you have status within your society and you can tolerate disrespect. If you are someone who lives in a society where there's a lot of income inequality, not just widespread poverty, but income inequality, where you know that other people are seen as more important than you, and you are seen as not very important at all, and your reputation is all that you have, you cannot allow people to disrespect you. And that's why when you read police reports, they start off crazy stupid. He borrowed his cell phone and then he wouldn't hand it back when he asked, and so he was shot. And you're like, why would you do that? If you're asking that question, that's because you have family relations, you have probably an income of some kind, you have some kind of status that doesn't depend on your ability to defend yourself. And so most murders are stupid because humans are lazy, stupid, and impulsive. We'll go into that more and more. Age, it's a young man's game. I want you to take a look at something. So again, this is from the FBI 2011. 80s are not murdering. Preteens are not murdering. But look, by the time you get to 17, you're all the way up there. You're right in there. Mid-20s to 30s to 40s to 50s, and you can still kill people at 75, oddly enough. You can still pull it off. It's not very likely, but don't let that stop you, writers. Use your imagination. I assume that they're just more dedicated than the rest of us. So you can see, you kind of age out of the game, and it's very fascinating. You find older serial killers who are caught in their 60s or 70s. They haven't murdered anyone in decades. They just don't get the same from it anymore, you know? It doesn't do it. It's not as easy and convenient as it used to be. We're going to go through this very quickly. I want to make a point that the victim is very seldom a stranger. We're looking at 11%. Now we do have this big unknown category, so this could be part of that. But strangers, 11%. We're not murdering strangers, we're murdering our wives and acquaintances. It goes so far off the chart, they have to do that little squiggly thing. Because acquaintances are the people that we kill. We kill and are killed by acquaintances. Someone that invited us to hang out on Friday night, and we're like, oh yeah, I don't really want to go to Jerry's party, but he did ask, so I'll go to Jerry's party. And we kind of know the people there, and we get into a fight. Something like that. Someone borrowed $50, didn't give it back. People that you don't have. We do kill our family just at an alarming rate, but acquaintances is where it is at. I do want to make that point. Next slide, please. Oh, good. Let me do this. We're already into how. What is the most likely methods? And I'm like, okay, now if I was going to murder someone, and you come up with this complicated plan so that no one would ever catch you, all of these great details, it's going to make it so hard for your detective to solve. Can you still hear me in the back? Okay, just making sure. I've got to fill this room. Next slide, please. Well, that's not how it works. Awesome, thank you. We are not killing each other in ways that are clever and premeditated so much. So you'll notice narcotics and poison. Can you poison someone on an impulse?
Unless you happen to have poison with you at the time.
I mean, like maybe there's some rat poison in the closet and you happen to make
Very powerful narcotics in the medicine cabinet.
Yeah, there are some things. Some of us have easier access to poison than others, but generally speaking, it's not an impulse. And if it is an impulse, then you probably did it sloppy and you're going to get caught by forensics. So we are hardly ever poisoning each other or narcotics and poison. Fire explosives, that's how I would do it. You burn down a building, you get rid of a lot of evidence, and then you get to be sad like, oh no, I lost my house and my husband, how could this happen to me? I'm so distraught, I can't answer your questions, officers. That's my plan. Sorry. And then there's strangulation, asphyxiation, and drowning. I would assume that those are just hard. We'll go into that a little bit more. Blunt objects, a little bit more. Personal weapons, your hands, your fists, your feet. That also includes pushing, which accounts for a lot of that category. Knives are cutting instruments, and then this is where we see that humans are dumb, lazy, and impulsive. We just shoot each other. Just most of the time, if someone happens to have a firearm and they happen to be angry enough, that is our go-to method. We're not complicated humans, not at all. So you would think that with the fact that people are just doing this, that these crimes would be easy to solve. The real-life detectives must have no trouble at all figuring out who shot who, right? Next slide, please. Still hard to solve. Percentage of crimes cleared by police in 2015. They cleared more murder crimes, they solved more of them than any other violent crime. But it's 61%, really close to 100. Not super duper, y'all. That's still a lot of crimes left unsolved, even though a lot of crimes are done by people who are in a hurry and not planning ahead. Now, a lot of this, it could be your real-life gritty detective who has to solve a real-life murder might run into problems that are a little bit more mundane than Moriarty's puzzles. You might run into the fact that no one wants to talk to the police in this neighborhood because of something that went down last year. Because the shooter is their neighbor. Because if you arrest the shooter's friends are still going to come after the witnesses. There are all sorts of factors to take into account, aside from just, well, the prints are on the gun. You can't always find the gun. You can't always find the weapon. You can make seemingly mundane obstacles a very big deal for your detective. I once had a friend who wrote a detective story set in the week between Christmas and New Year's in Washington, D.C. And I don't know if you've ever worked for the federal government or known someone. Nothing gets accomplished, even more so than in business. Nothing gets accomplished between Christmas and New Year's, and he had to get forensic evidence before it expired. And that was his detective's big obstacle, and it was strangely compelling. So I'd like you to find excitement in the mundane, because there's something about that that's very relatable to the audience. Oh, and now we're into the fun stuff. This is my psychology background coming in, and I love this bit. The 7 deadly sins of murder. There's an Australian researcher, and she broke down all of the murders for 2 years in Australia. In Australia, they only had 430 murders in the course of 2 years. Australia is the 3rd lowest murder per capita, so she didn't have that much. She had a lot less to work with, and she had a lot fewer impulse killings, very few gun killings there. So she had a slightly different data set to work with, a very different data set than we do in America. But I believe that humans are humans and still murder each other for the same basic reasons, even though the FBI will classify a motive this way, the police will classify it this way, and my researcher will classify it that way. I felt that this was the most useful psychologically for a writer when you're building the profile of your murderer. Oh, there was something I wanted to say about the profile of your murderer in the how. Don't go back, but I want you to think a little bit about the method and physical distance and what that says about your murderer. So if that chair right there is a victim with a gun, I can kill them from a reasonable distance. I'm a lousy shot. I'm a really lousy shot. I could probably pull it off from here. There are many people who could pull it off from there. I don't really have to look them in the face as I do this. I don't have to touch them. I don't have to get close. I can do it on impulse. I can just be angry. I can plan it in advance and not really think about what I'm doing. I can be weak. I can be small. If this chair is a murder victim and I want to get them with a gun, first of all, it's going to take more than once, unless I'm very lucky or well trained. It's going to take more than once to get in there and in there and in there multiple times. And then I want you to think about with your hands. What does that say about the psychological profile of your murderer if they're getting in there with their hands, particularly something like strangling? Because it's not just an attack again and again. Hold it for a long time. What does that say about your murderer? So you cannot match. When you're choosing the method, I'd like you not to just think about what the opportunity is or what the plot requires. Match it to the skills, the level of anger, and kind of the forethought that the murderer might put into something like that. Physical and emotional distance is very important. One more click, please. So of these 7 gain, revenge, and jealousy are the 3 motives that we're going to see most often. They pop up on almost every single list. When you classify a murder, you list multiple motives. Gain, revenge, and jealousy are the big 3 that all pop up on almost all of them. So we're going to go in. Sorry, I'm pregnant, I can't take my full breaths. Get enough oxygen space. So, gain, we're going to see this one again and again. People who, your typical profile for a gain is not gain, like violence, like you want to gain something. They tend to be a little bit different. The perpetrator will likely know the victim and know that the victim has something that they want. Sometimes the thing that they want, it isn't always money. Sometimes the thing that they want is the victim. There's a bit of an overlap between gain and revenge. Like you think you can still get this person back in your life. This also includes assassins and hitmen, and cases with assassins and hitmen, I should add, are extremely difficult to solve because that's when they have no relationship to the murder victim and they do plan things out in advance. So those are fun mysteries. And this is unusual because in this, 31% of gain killers are women, which is an unusually high number. It's still not a majority, but it's one of the motives that appeals to women much more often. So at a time when a husband is considering divorcing her and that might leave her financially unstable, or she is concerned that she will be left out of the will, those are times when a woman might be much more likely to murder her spouse. And again, spouses. People just kill their spouses. Left and right. It's also one of the crimes where you can see older murderers. You see, still the majority is younger, but if you have an older murderer, this is probably the category that they're going to go into. There's jealousy. It's It doesn't even have to be a real threat.
Somebody photoshopping paper.
So he's probably not going to do anything about it, and she could just leave him. And yet, people are weird and twisty inside. So when you feel a sense of rejection, and often when you believe that you can still persuade the partner to return, so you go over to your partner, you go over to their apartment, and you give them the baby come back speech, and it doesn't go the way you wanted it to. Why did it? I went this way in my head. In my head, I explained everything, and you said that you were sorry, and then we kissed, and it was better. Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you following the script that I had in my head? And then you're dead. But there are a lot of ways that this can go down, and we see this so often. Once again, this is one of the big three motives. Revenge. If I can't have you, no one can. That's the category that this goes into. It's also mostly about protecting your pride and escaping the sense of shame. You have been put down in some way. You have lost your job, you have been wronged. Someone in your family has been hurt or embarrassed, and you can't get away from that feeling. You carry it with you all of the time, and you stew in it. So if anyone is going to do a premeditated murder, it's someone with a revenge motive. They tend to think about it more for a longer time. So if you want someone with a complicated, twisty murder, this is your go-to revenge. We also find honor killings. And it's not always of the person who has, quote, done wrong. Sometimes it's just the person who has been wronged. So for instance, at certain times and places in human history, if your daughter had been raped, you might kill your daughter to escape the sense of shame rather than the person that raped her, so that you can free your family from this. That's psychologically what you are trying to do with a murder like that. And then there's conviction and hate crimes. It's not about the victim. Often they only kind of know the victim. Often it's just an acquaintance or just somebody who got under your skin. So when there's a hate murder based off of ethnicity, class, religion, whatever it is, they don't know them very well. The individual person that they're killing isn't what matters to them. Like maybe that individual did something that rubs them the wrong way, they got into a fight, but it pressed a button that already existed in our murderer's head. So that victim accidentally stumbled on that switch, and now this guy, and it's almost always a guy, and it's almost always a younger guy, and now he's on, and he feels totally justified in his actions, and he's more likely than any other motive to get off with an insanity plea because he doesn't know the victim, and it's very easy to convince a jury, like, oh, this man acted out of a place of instability, and it's very easy to show that they're unstable because often people who are involved in hate groups, they typically are pretty unstable people. So it's easier for them to get off on an insanity plea. Whether or not that is valid, that is largely a matter of personal opinion. And then there's the thrill killers. Serial killers fall under this category, but not everyone who kills for thrill is a serial killer. Sometimes they're just a one-off. The FBI classifies you as a serial killer even if you just kill 2 people that you have no connection to. All it takes is 2 people that are total strangers to you, and boom, you're a serial killer. You qualify. It's easier than getting into college.
Okay.
There are all sorts of things that you get out of this: power, control, dominance, sexual satisfaction, catharsis. You and I have a bad day at work. We have our own ways of coping. If we feel like we're just the lowest and no one respects us and everything's going wrong, we have ways of getting back on top. Maybe we plan a vacation that we can't afford and we don't actually take. Maybe we call a friend. We have all kinds. I assume everyone here has other methods of dealing with problems besides hurting people. I hope. For them, this is their way of getting back on top, because how do you show that you're powerful more than taking the life of another human? what could be more, like more a show of dominance than that? My boss might not respect me, but everyone should respect me because I am strong, I am powerful, and now you're dead. That's obviously not something that I think fixes the problem, but there you go. That's a little bit of the psychology behind the thrill. And then there's the love killing. There's no way around it. These are super tragic and doubly sad. So you have assisted suicides are technically classified as love killings, but you also have times when often it's a caregiver, and this is one of the ones where you're more likely to be female than male. This is like the only category where women outnumber men as murderers. Often a caregiver decides that their charge is better off dead for whatever reason. Maybe they believe that this person is possessed by the devil and therefore better off dead. Maybe they believe that this person is in so much pain that their life is so terrible and therefore they're better off dead. Or sometimes we have an extended suicide where someone is going to kill themselves, but there's someone who depends on them. And who will take care of this person when I'm gone? And so they've reached the point in their minds where it makes sense that it's kinder to kill this person along with themselves. And you can see that their methods are different. They're trying to do this in a way that eases the victim into death, with sleeping pills, with suffocation. You guys, just so you know, I hope you'll never need this information, but suffocation is not a gentle way to kill people. It is not gentle, it hurts. It hurts and it hurts and it hurts. And they're not going to odds are that they're not going to, if you get them with a pillow while they sleep, they're not going to just, no, they're going to wake up, they're going to fight back, it's going to take a long time, they're going to knock over the vase, it's not a quiet crime the way you think it's going to be. They're gonna just keep fighting you, it is not gentle, like people think it is. So you can see pills, poison, suffocation, strangling, the things that people think aren't going to hurt so much in these quote murders. It's just the saddest category of murder, but it's also very twisty, and it's a terrible, terrible surprise for your detective. Then there's concealment, trying to cover up a crime. Sometimes this is after the crime you kill someone to conceal. Most of the time it's going to be during the crime. So you'll see it's mostly committed by young men and often in groups. So most of the other murders are done by individuals. This is done often by groups and to strangers. I told you that we don't kill strangers very often. This is one of the times where we do kill strangers. And this is one of the ones I told you, women, that you're mostly safe. Mostly sorry. Women make up more than half of the victims in a concealment crime because a man rapes her and then says, oh, she might not like this, and maybe tell somebody, oh gee. And then she's dead, and it's very unfortunate. Like I said, we're going to be very glib. Next slide, please. And now we get into some world-building stuff. So I told you, humans are humans, and we murder people for the same reasons across the globe, cross-culturally, through all times, people are people. That being said, the form that these motivations take is very different. For instance, in medieval times, it used to be not common, murders have never been super common, but there was a time where it was considered not really that bad of a murder if you killed a small child as a way to commit suicide. It was kind of seen as a way around the prohibition to not commit suicide, so your soul would be okay. Because you've killed a baptized child, that kid's going to heaven. You're fine. You're gonna get hung, so you're not going to go to hell the way you would if you killed yourself, because the Catholic Church said you can't commit suicide. So while this was frowned upon, obviously, this was never a popular thing to do, was a thing. It's not a thing now because our society has changed. And now we're like, okay, given a wrongness scale between committing suicide or killing a child is bad. Our society is like, that's worse. A different society pointed and said, well, that's just not as bad as that, though. We make different moral decisions. So I want you to look at how this happens, 2013, modern day, same planet, same people, humans are humans. So we have personal vendetta or animosity, revenge, hate, property dispute, that's the gain motive that we just talked about. Love affairs, sexual cases, that's jealousy, we have gain. And then we come down to something that we as Americans, we kind of stutter over, like dowry. Who gets murdered over a dowry? I don't know anyone who's been murdered over a dowry. That's because I live in America, and my parents gave me $600 for a dress. That was my wedding. That's a very different standard. But it's one of the more common reasons to get murdered is because a woman marries into a family. The family feels that she's not provided enough money, and maybe she's lazy to boot, and they feel like, yeah, it's fine, we can off you. Maybe we can find someone else who can contribute a little bit more. You're not even trying. Are you even pressuring? Did you even talk to your father about the dowry? I told you to talk to your father about the dowry. This is something that isn't easily comprehensible to us just because it's given society and culture. Witchcraft. I don't know anyone who's been murdered because they're accused of being a witch. That's not something that we do. I want you to think, for especially fantasy writers, do I have any fantasy writers who are creating an entirely new world out of nothing? Yes. Sci-fi writers, do I have you where you're imagining a future that's very different from ours? Yes. You cannot copy and paste the crimes of 2019 America and the motives and the psychological profile of 2019 America onto your fantasy novel, onto your sci-fi novel. They will have different values. They might decide that suicide is worse than killing a child because that makes sense in the confines of the way they interpret their religion. There are all sorts of different judgment calls, and it's really, really fun and twisty and weird to see characters make moral choices that are horrifying to us. I love that. It's fabulous and scary because it makes you wonder what's arbitrary about our morals. So scary, so scary. All right, with that in mind, could you get to the next slide? And then those are my sources, and then at the very end, you can contact me for a copy of this slideshow. And I saw that there were some hands during the presentation who I will now take questions. Yes?
When it comes to how they categorize murders as terrorism, related murder go under like hate or
Conviction or a hate crime, yes, terrorism would be under that. That's a sadly universal motive, yes.
But
yes.
they'll still make, but those terrorist crimes, they still make up a pretty small majority of a small percentage of murders committed, right?
Yes, it's kind of like dead white ladies. Dead white ladies are very interesting to the general population. Dead white ladies are very good for viewing. Same thing with terrorists. Terrorists are very interesting. We're very scared of them. It's not nearly as common. It's not at all as common. It's not portrayed the same at all. If I died, honestly, I could die holding up a grocery store with a gun while selling drugs to small children, and I would still be portrayed as, oh, it's so tragic. It's so tragic. Whereas your most common murder victim is a black man, and when you see them in the news, they're like, they were outside at a park at night, a park that is known to have gang-related activity, and they leave it to you to say, well, they were there doing gang-related activity. I'm like, he was walking his dog, man. It's portrayed very, very differently depending on who you are. I will always be a lawyer, no matter what I do. Any more questions? Oh, your hand was up?
Yeah, So you were warning the ladies about if their husband had a gun, but what about a warning for the men who don't want
You are still 6 times less likely to be shot by your partner if you're a man. But a gun still increases. A gun in your household increases your odds of dying by a gun. I have a sword in my household. My odds of dying by a sword are just way higher than my next door neighbor who owns no swords. Jano?
With like the angel of death category of serial killer, would you say that falls under love or thrill, or is it kind of like a weird in between?
You're talking about caregivers who kill multiple people in their charge. That would involve an interview with the caregiver. More often than not, if they are doing it out of a place of like genuine concern, then yes, it would be categorized as a love killing. If they get a little something out of it, if it gives them a little bit of a buzz, then that would be more of a thrill killing where they want to exert power. Maybe they tell themselves a story about it being love. But that's how humans are weird and gross. And we convince ourselves that we're the good guys, even as we kill people for their own good, who did not ask to be killed. More questions, yes.
Do the 7 reasons, do they intertwine, or is it really only like one or the other?
Every murder will probably have multiple reasons, and often you'll see the big 3, gain, jealousy, and revenge in almost every murder. And then maybe a little something else thrown in on the side. I feel like I missed one. Yes?
So, sorry, when you were talking earlier about like a love killing, is it still considered murder if you have predictable death?
By the law of the land and depending on the state, pretty much, yeah. This was done by an Australian researcher, so I don't know what the laws are in Australia, but definitely, definitely that was how she put it down. Assisted suicide is very interesting. I know that there are certain countries where, you sign a document and someone can administer a lethal injection to you in a controlled site, but that's not America. I mean, do you think about it, Jenny?
It's just good to know.
Who else? More questions? Yes?
I don't know, there's no one else.
No.
What, just in your opinion, do you think is the fascination that we have of like that the new Ted Bundy movie, or like you hear all the time when people watch certain shows, serial killer murders, and they are attracted to the murder, those kind of things. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, it's the same reason we love psychopaths. We like to pretend that they're monsters who have nothing to do with the rest of us. And they are pretty terrible, and it is pretty hard to get into their brain, but I know a psychopath, and they're mostly normal, except for when they're not, and except under certain occasions, and while she's never going to kill anyone, probably, of all the people I know, she's like the most likely, but that still doesn't make her super likely. She's us, because we like to see the juxtaposition of someone who does something that we think we would never do, who acts just like the rest of us. We're like, oh, are you kidding me? They pay their taxes, they have a dog and then 2 children just like me, and yet they commit this terrible crime. And some of us, it makes us look inside and be like, could I have ever done anything so awful? I don't know. I think that's part of the weird fascination we have with this teeny tiny percent of the population. Serial killers are super duper rare. Just the rarest of all killers, because we only kill people that were on an impulse or related to or acquainted with somehow. Yes?
Okay, so how much do you think, of the 7 deadly sins of murder, how many of them do you think would easily be attributed to mental illness?
That's always tricky, because in a court situation, we try to get as a lawyer, you are obliged to get as many of your clients off the hook for mental illness as possible. And so on the one hand, you have people pushing to get that through, and then on the other hand, you have judges and juries who are like, I've heard this story too many times, pushing in the other direction, and the truth is somewhere in the middle, and I don't think that anyone can be really certain. I suspect that most impulse killings Oh, no, I can't even say that. I'd say that the better your life and your environment is, the less likely you are to feel like you need to hurt someone, get out of a bad situation through violence, etc. And I'd say that the worse your life is, and mental illness is one of those huge things that piles on and makes your life 10 times worse, you're more likely. I wish I could give you any kind of number. I wish that any kind of number.
That's fair, thank you very much.
All right, I have one more question. Who wants it? One more.
Jim. I'm trying to, shit, I'll just ask you after when I remember what it was.
There one guy in the back with sunglasses, yes.
I was just wondering if you could say once spell out first word of the email. I can't speak to that.
Oh, the first word of the email?
Yeah.
Okay, HENRIKSEN.LAURA.M@gmail.com. Everything else, all of my social media is under McGill because I was lightly stalked, just lightly. But I haven't changed my email, so I just have to rely on all of you nice people to not lightly stalk me. Heads? Nod your heads? Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for